Hey, it doesn't matter if Week 9 made you smile or say a curse word. There's still rosters to be set here in Week 10. Let's talk some running backs. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Jake, Fantasy Headliners. Hopefully everybody's having a good week out there. Today we're talking about running backs, starts and sits. Going to go through all the matchups, give everybody a designation, trying to help you guys set those lineups. And then also, real quick, before I forget, the live show, end of the week. I've been doing it the last few weeks, been a big hit, really enjoyed doing it. Trying to get it scheduled for somewhere right around Saturday afternoon, right around 3 p.m. if possible. Make sure you're checking YouTube, though. I'll be putting posts in there, letting you guys know the final time once I can get it nailed down. I really appreciate the support, though. And now, let's talk about some running backs here for Week 10. Kicking it off on Thursday Night Football, we have the Panthers at the Steelers. And on paper, this looks like a difficult matchup for the Panthers, right? I mean, Pittsburgh is the number 2 rated defense against opposing running backs, giving up on average only 17 points per game. They've only given up 4 rushing touchdowns on the year, haven't allowed a 100-yard rusher since Week 1. I mean, things are just lining up for this to be a tough game for Christian McCaffrey. But you got to remember, Christian McCaffrey is not just a normal, regular old running back. Yes, last week he had 17 carries for 79 yards and 2 touchdowns. But even if that part of his game is limited, he's always going to be involved in the passing game and always has that upside. I still like Christian McCaffrey. I know it says it's a difficult matchup on paper, but he can beat you so many different ways. He's a definite start for me on Thursday night. For the Steelers, we still have James Conner, which still makes me happy because it means Le'Veon Bell is still not there, which makes me feel a little bit better about my preseason prediction still. But James Conner is doing things that Le'Veon Bell never did. James Conner is playing ridiculously good football. He's got 7 touchdowns over his last 4 games. Over those last 4 games, the lowest rushing total he's had is 107 yards. He's involved in the passing game, averaging close to 5 receptions a game. And yes, it's a difficult matchup for him also. The Panthers, the 5th-ranked team against opposing running backs, giving up almost 19 points a game. They've only allowed 1 rushing touchdown from now up until Week 3. So they're a difficult team to run on. But let's be realistic. James Conner doesn't really care about you or your defense. He's going to run all over you. He's going to break tackles. He's going to elude tackles. This kid has been nothing short of an absolute, thrill to watch. It's kind of made people forget, at least in real football terms, forget about Le'Veon Bell. Outside of fantasy football, the Steelers really aren't missing him. This is somebody who's averaging close to 30 points a game. I mean, we talk about Todd Gurley all the time. The last 4 weeks, James Conner has more than likely helped you win your matchup all by himself. If you have him, you start him. I don't care about Le'Veon Bell. I really don't even care when he comes back. James Conner is the starting running back of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and as long as that's the case, he is a must-start regardless of matchup. To Sunday we go, and the first game we talk about is the New Orleans Saints and the Cincinnati Bengals. Now for the Saints, Alvin Kamara, he's a must-start every single week, right? We really don't even need to discuss Alvin Kamara. If you have him, you're starting him. Mark Ingram is the question mark, and it's almost a question mark every single week. Last week, Mark Ingram didn't do anything. 9 carries for 33 yards, 2 fantasy points. Thanks for nothing, Mark Ingram. But this is a great matchup against the Cincinnati Bengals team, which is giving up almost 30 points a game to opposing running backs. They've allowed a rushing touchdown all but 3 weeks so far this season. They're definitely somebody that can be run on. And that offense there in Cincinnati took a big hit losing A.J. Green. Yes, I do expect Tyler Boyd to take a step forward, but if this offense struggles and they can't score on the New Orleans Saints, this could turn into a game where we see a lot of running on the Saints side of the football, which would give Mark Ingram more upside. I actually like Mark Ingram this week, and I know that sounds a little crazy because he hasn't really done anything since the week he came back to be liked. But I do. I like Mark Ingram, and I'm going to start him this week. I think he has the potential for some garbage points, some second half points, maybe even a goal line touchdown. I like Mark Ingram's chances here this week. On the Bengals side of the football, I'm a little worried about Joe Mixon, and for a couple reasons. Now, Joe Mixon has been a great talent. He's been a great producer of fantasy points when he's been in your lineup. The problem is the Saints' defense is a little bit better than they're still getting credit for. On average, they give up 20 points per game to opposing running backs, but they have yet to allow more than 76 yards on the ground and have never allowed multiple touchdowns in a game to opposing running backs. And this could be the week that Gio Bernard comes back. Now, typically you'd be like, who cares? Gio Bernard comes back. Joe Mixon can play all 3 downs. And I agree with you. The problem is Marvin Lewis doesn't agree with us. And he's going to use Gio Bernard if he's available. If he is, that's less touches for Mixon, less possible upside. I can see more potential in the passing game for Mixon than the running game this week. But if Gio Bernard is there eating into those touches, I'm really, really worried for Joe Mixon. If you have him and you have no better options, you're going to be stuck starting him, but I have tempered expectations about him. If you have a better option on the bench, as crazy as it sounds, I'm not against sitting Joe Mixon this week. Falcons and Browns are next, and Tevin Coleman, if I had hair, I would have pulled it out last week with him. Now everybody's saying, why? He had a great game. Exactly. He wasn't supposed to have a great game. The one game really all year where he wasn't supposed to do good, and he did great. 13 carries, 88 yards rushing, and then added in another 5 receptions, 68 yards, and 2 touchdowns for 32 fantasy points. The best game he'd had all year, he'd only scored 16, and then he went up against one of the toughest run defenses in all of the NFL in the Washington Redskins and had a heyday. Thank you very much, Tevin Coleman. You really helped me on my bench last week. Now for this week, he's got a great matchup, right? Going up against the 29th ranked defense of the Cleveland Browns, giving up almost 30 points a game, multiple touchdowns given up to opposing running backs 3 out of the last 4 weeks. This is a slam dunk for Tevin Coleman, right? It should be. He should be a must start this week. The problem is he's had these types of opportunities before and totally laid an egg with it. Which Tevin Coleman do we get? I'm going to err on the side of caution and say, yes, we should start Tevin Coleman. Maybe they figured something out during the bye week. They're trying to get him the ball in space, trying to involve him more in the passing game. Ito Smith is still there, but this is still Tevin Coleman's backfield. Just be wary of Tevin Coleman. Don't go out there and ever be overly excited because he could let you down in the snap of a finger. However, this is a great matchup, one which he should excel in, and he is a start for me this week. Please don't let me down, Tevin Coleman. For the Browns, we have Nick Chubb and Duke Johnson. Now, both of these guys on paper should be must-starts going up against an Atlanta Falcons team who's the 30th ranked defense against opposing running backs. The difference is Atlanta looked pretty good on defense last week coming out of the bye week against Washington and Adrian Peterson, where they only allowed 57 yards rushing. They haven't allowed more than 100 yards rushing to opposing running backs since week 5, and that's the only week all year they've allowed over 100 yards rushing to opposing running backs. This is a decent, defense against the run. The problem is they give up a lot of touchdowns, so therefore they're ranked really low. The touchdown upside is there, which is great. It makes Nick Chubb a start for the week. The problem is we got to get the Browns into the red zone. In order to get Nick Chubb a chance at these touchdowns, he's not able to break any really long runs, but he still is productive. He is still definitely worth a start. Very few running backs touch the ball 20 times a week. Nick Chubb is one of them. Last week, 22 carries, 85 yards, and a touchdown for a solid 16 points. He's not going to be involved in the passing game, but if you have Nick Chubb, he's a great start this week just based off of volume alone, and the opportunity for the touchdowns are there. Nick Chubb could be a great, surprise for you this week. Easily could get you double-digit points here in Week 10. Same thing goes for Duke Johnson, though. If you have him, you kind of saw what his potential was last week, right? He's definitely somebody who's not going to run the ball a lot. Only 1 carry for 8 yards, but he added in 9 receptions, 78 yards, and 2 touchdowns last week. That's the type of upside that I've been waiting for from Duke Johnson for weeks. I've seen it coming for weeks. They couldn't get it going. Now that Hugh Jackson is out, it's probably starting to look like Hugh Jackson was the problem because Duke Johnson saw the ball a lot more last week than he had all year long, and I expect that to continue under this new coaching staff in Cleveland. Let's be realistic. They're going to be trailing a lot in Cleveland. They're going to have to throw the ball a lot. They're going to be at home, which is great. Going up against the Falcons offense, which can put up points. It could relate to more throwing on the Browns side. Duke Johnson has that huge upside again, and he's going to be a start for me here again in Week 10. Lions and Bears are next, and the only thing missing is the Tigers from the song from The Wizard of Oz. If you know what I'm talking about, hit the like button for all you old people out there. But let's talk about the Lions and Kerryon Johnson. I love the upside of Kerryon Johnson. The issue is they just don't get him the ball enough. And there's something going on there where LeGarrette Blount must have some type of incriminating pictures of something to do with Matt Patricia because he always seems to get the touchdown carries. And Kerryon Johnson didn't really overwhelm last week, right? Against Minnesota, whose defense looked amazing, by the way. He only had 12 carries for 37 yards. And that Minnesota defense got to the quarterback whenever they wanted to. They said every play they were into the backfield. Kerryon had nowhere to run. And that's somewhat of an issue going forward. Not so much Kerryon Johnson or even the amount of work he's getting. The offensive line seems to be trending down, which does not bode well for Kerryon Johnson. Well, how are they rewarded this week? With the Chicago Bears. I'm not looking forward to starting Kerryon Johnson at all this week. This offensive line already has issues, and now it gets the Bears, who are the number 1 ranked defense against opposing running backs, who have yet to allow a rushing touchdown to an opposing running back, who have only given up over 100 yards one time. I'm not touching Kerryon Johnson this week. I'm passing on him. I love the upside, but not this week. For the Bears, does anybody else kind of feel like Matt Nagy is just playing with our fantasy football minds? Because this last week lined up great for Tariq Cohen to have himself a huge week. And what happened? Tariq Cohen had 6 carries for 5 yards, and his second straight week of only 1 reception for 8 yards? That's not what we're expecting out of that offense in Tariq Cohen. And now all of a sudden, Jordan Howard is fantasy relevant again. Last week, 14 carries, 47 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's now 3 straight weeks with a touchdown, 4 touchdowns over his last 3 games, and they have a great matchup. The 25th ranked defense of the Detroit Lions, giving up on average almost 29 points per game. They've allowed at least 1 rushing touchdown for 3 straight weeks. But what's going on with the whole Tariq Cohen, Jordan Howard split? It seems like it's finally starting to fade its way back towards Jordan Howard. Now, yes, this is highly game script related. But if I had to guess, the Bears defense is going to be able to get after the Detroit Lions offense pretty easily. If that's the case, I can see there being more of a lead in the second half for the Chicago Bears, boding better for Jordan Howard again. Jordan Howard is going to be a start for me, but Tariq Cohen, unless you're in a full-point PPR league and he can regain some of this magic that he had a few weeks ago, he's going to be a sit for me until we can figure out what's going on with his usage and why is it going down all of a sudden. Arizona and Kansas City are next, and one of my starts of the week is going to be David Johnson. And a lot of you guys were like, duh, it's David Johnson. But honestly, if you have him, you're disappointed in him. He's still the 15th ranked running back in PPR leagues, but he hasn't had more than 71 rushing yards in any game this season. Yes, he has 5 touchdowns rushing, and he has a great matchup this week, going up against the 32nd ranked run defense in the Kansas City Chiefs, giving up almost 34.5 points per game to opposing running backs. The problem is, when David Johnson gets the ball, he really doesn't have anywhere to go with it. He's literally got the defensive players in his face the second he takes the handoff. The positive of that, they're playing the Kansas City Chiefs, and we say it every week. The Chiefs are going to score points, and they're going to score a lot of points, and I can't really see the Cardinals limiting that upside of that offense. So therefore, they're going to have to throw the ball a lot more. Insert David Johnson's pass-catching ability. Now, this hasn't been used earlier in the season, but since the change in offensive coordinator to Byron Leftwich, I can see it slowly starting to work back that way. Now, yes, they're coming off the bye week, which is going to be a big help. A lot of teams coming out of the bye play better because they had a week to prepare for this game. They have had a week to scheme for this opposing team. They have, a game plan built specifically for this game. They basically had almost 2 weeks to prep for it. I expect a lot of David Johnson in this game. This could be his best game of the season, and he is a definite must-start, one of my starts of the week here for Week 10. On the other side of the ball, you have Kareem Hunt. Yeah, I got nothing bad to say about Kareem Hunt. I mean, if you have him, you start him. It's a great matchup. Enjoy yourself. Put him in your lineup. Don't worry about it. Kick back, relax, whatever. You're fine with Kareem Hunt. New England, Tennessee is next, and New England could have Sony Michel back this week, but that doesn't mean you automatically have to put him into your starting lineup. James White has been so consistent and so productive in this offense. I can't see them just rushing Sony back and giving him 20 carries. You've had other options the past couple weeks while Sony Michel has been out. Personally, I would rather sit Sony Michel for 1 week. There's a chance that he comes out and they slowly work him back into action. He has had almost 3 weeks off. They have a bye week next week. No reason to go out there and absolutely, give him 20 to 25 touches when he's got a bye week coming. Go out there, get him a handful of touches, get him back in the game flow, go into the bye week, and then I expect a heavy dose of Sony Michel starting in week 12. As for week 10, I'm going to sit Sony Michel. I don't want to have to worry about what kind of a limited workload he could see from Bill Belichick. James White must start. I don't care if it's standard. I don't care if it's PPR. I don't care if it's half-point PPR. I don't care if it's old school dial-up AOL fantasy football. I don't care what you're doing. If you have James White, you should perma start him. I'm almost thinking about starting him on his bye week. That's how much I love James White. If you have him, please put him in your lineup. I don't care about anything else. He's a definite must start. Who would have thought that at this point of the season, going into week 10, right now James White is running back 6 in fantasy football. Dude's killing it. All right, for the Titans, we have Dion Lewis and Derrick Henry. And let's be realistic. I just said Derrick Henry just to see who was paying attention because your ears probably perked up when you heard it. We're not going to start Derrick Henry yet. But Dion Lewis is somebody who's definitely deserving of a start. And especially this game. He's going up against his rival, the New England Patriots. He's going to be at home in Tennessee. He's coming off a game in which he scored 22 fantasy points. That's back-to-back games with 20-plus points. This past week against the Dallas Cowboys, 19 carries, 62 yards, another 4 receptions, 60 yards, and a touchdown. They're starting to feature Dion Lewis way more than Derrick Henry. Yes, Derrick Henry had a touchdown, and now he's had touchdowns in back-to-back games. I get it, but he's more relegated to the goal line duty. The team is going to rely on Dion Lewis going forward, and I love him this week, especially in PPR leagues. He's going to be one of my starts of the week. Dion Lewis could have himself a big game, a revenge game against a New England Patriots team who isn't bad against the run. They're giving up on average 23, almost 24 points per game. Last week against the Packers, they gave up 110 yards rushing. But it's not just the rushing that benefits Dion Lewis. He's getting the carries, but it's his involvement in the passing game and the likelihood of Marcus Mariota checking down to him early and often. Love Dion Lewis this week. Redskins and Bucks are next, and all the stars were aligned last week, right, for Adrian Peterson. He had the Falcons. He was at home. He was coming off a huge 149-yard, 1-touchdown game, and he gets 9 carries for 17 yards. What had happened was, Adrian Peterson totally took a nosedive in a game that a lot of people were expecting a lot more. But he gets a great matchup again this week. The 27th ranked defense to opposing running backs of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They've allowed at least one, sometimes multiple, up to 3 rushing touchdowns in each of their last 4 games. They are prone to turning the ball over on offense in Tampa Bay, which gives the defense more opportunities. More times than not, the defense is getting more plays run per game against the Bucs than other teams in the NFL, leading to more opportunities for rushing. I definitely like Adrian Peterson again this week. Chris Thompson, Capri Bibbs, not too much in anyone's game plan to actually start unless you're in a super deep league. Capri Bibbs could be an option if Chris Thompson is limited or sits again. But Adrian Peterson should be somebody who sees the volume going forward. It was a bad week, but I'm looking for a bounce back and definitely going to start Adrian Peterson this week in Week 10. On the Bucs side of the football, we have Peyton Barber. And there is nothing good to say about Peyton Barber or the Tampa Bay running game. If Peyton Barber's in your starting lineup for Week 10 and you're not in a really super deep league, I'm sorry, but you've already lost. In what could be one of the games of the week, we have the Buffalo Bills at the New York Jets. Just kidding. It's not going to be that good. It's really not. But let's talk about it anyway. LaShawn McCoy and the Buffalo Bills. Now, I really want to start LaShawn McCoy. He has, talent left in the tank. The problem? That offense led by Nathan Peterman is enough to make you gag, and the defense lets things through easier than single-ply toilet paper. They're not that good. LaShawn McCoy's upside is limited almost every single week. Last week, 10 carries for 10 yards. That's not going to cut it. He had his lowest snap rate of the season. There's not a whole lot really going for LaShawn McCoy. It's not a horrible matchup against the New York Jets. They give up on average 24.4 points per game to opposing running backs, so it is a decent matchup for him. I don't want to start him, though. If you have no other choice, then I'm okay starting LaShawn McCoy this week. But if you have somebody on your bench that actually has an offensive line or at least a starting quarterback, I would much rather take my chances on them than LaShawn McCoy. To me, it's just too risky to start anybody, remotely close to a Bills uniform. On the Jets side of the football, you have Isaiah Crowell and Elijah McGuire. Now, Crowell has seemed to come back down to earth, right, since his Week 5 200-yard performance. He's back to his old Isaiah Crowell self. But now we have Elijah McGuire in the mix, and he's somebody who they're going to start giving more and more to every single week. They eased him back into action last week. It was his first game of the season. Only 3 receptions for 37 yards, and he added in another 7 carries for 30 yards. But this is something where they start giving him a little bit more each week. The Bills' defense really struggles because of the Bills' offense. The offense turns the ball over so much with Nathan Peterman under center that opponents are getting goal line carries on their first play of the series. It's just really limiting the defense for the Bills, and it's making their numbers look worse than they really are. This is a fairly decent run defense in Buffalo. I'm going to make Isaiah Crowell one of my sits of the week, partially because I see a lot more Elijah McGuire this week than I do Isaiah Crowell. He'll be strictly touchdown dependent. If he doesn't get the touchdowns, he's not going to have a great fantasy day. Personally, I would rather start Elijah McGuire in a 12-team league or larger as a flex play than I would risk it with Isaiah Crowell this week. Jags and Colts are next, and the Jags are going to be a jumbled mess for a few weeks. Yes, there's a possibility that Leonard Fournette comes back this week. That's great. But they still have Carlos Hyde and TJ Yeldon. Now, do they give Fournette 20 touches in his first week back, coming off a soft tissue injury, the hamstring issue that has bothered him all season? I don't think so. Why would they risk it throwing him out there, giving him 20 to 25 touches? He's going to be solely touchdown dependent. And in this offense, those opportunities are few and far between. They still have TJ Yeldon, who's been productive while Fournette has been out. They traded for Carlos Hyde, who is still a viable option. I can see them easing Fournette back into it. There's no need for them to go out there and absolutely kill him with touches. Unfortunately, that kills the fantasy value of a lot of these guys, because you really can't count on one of them. For me, right now, I'm sitting all the Jaguars running backs until we can see who establishes themselves as that solid early down work, and then the pass catching role has typically been held by Fournette and Yeldon. But how does Hyde fit into the mix? We need to see how that works out here for a week before we rush into starting any of these guys here in Week 10. On the Colts side of the football, this one may be a little bit surprising to you guys. Marlon Mack is going to be a sit for me here in Week 10. Now, yes, they're coming off the bye week, which is great. He's still dealing with somewhat of an ankle injury that it was hampering him, if you can say that, before the bye week, even though he was putting up ridiculous numbers. But they're going to go up against the Jacksonville Jaguars at home. The Jags are coming off the bye week also. They've had almost 2 weeks to prep for this game. They've had that 2 weeks of film on Marlon Mack to prep for. This is a defense that's been very embarrassed early on in the season, and I expect them to pick it up here second half of the season, especially coming out of the bye week. They are still the 7th-ranked defense against opposing running backs, giving up on average only 19 points per game, haven't allowed more than 1 rushing touchdown in a game all year. The game before the bye week against the Philadelphia Eagles only allowed 91 yards, no touchdowns. This is definitely a defense that needs to come out and prove themselves. And coming out of the bye week, I expect a little bit more from the Jaguars this week, and that's going to make Marlon Mack a sit for me here in Week 10. Chargers and Raiders are next, and for the Chargers, you have Melvin Gordon. He's an obvious must start. It's good to see him come out, have a big game, 113 yards and a touchdown, coming off that hamstring issue that he had where he missed the Week 7 game. Then had the bye week to recover a little bit. Looked great last week. Definite must start against the Oakland Raiders. Not going to sell you on starting Melvin Gordon. Austin Eckler, on the other hand, is somebody who's taken a hit in value recently, and I really don't understand a whole lot why. The guy's touches have gone down dramatically over the past few weeks, including last week against the Seahawks, where he only had 3 carries for 21 yards, but more importantly, only had 1 reception for 13 yards. The receptions, if those start to go down, Eckler starts losing a lot of volume. Now, luckily, they're going up against the Oakland Raiders. And like I said in my waiver wire video, the Raiders don't seem to give a crap. So you can score on the Raiders and almost score on them with ease. Nick Mullins looked like the GOAT up against this defense here last week. I like Austin Eckler as a flex play, especially in deeper leagues and PPR leagues. I can see some garbage points coming for Austin Eckler this week. If they have a lead there in the beginning, I don't see them going out there and running Melvin Gordon for 4 quarters. It's a solid run offense there in Los Angeles. Eckler could have a decent second half in that game. So like I said, if you're in a 12-team league or larger, geez, easy for me to say, then Austin Eckler is a solid flex play this week. I do expect more in the second half. So if you start him and he starts off slow, don't get worried. I expect those numbers to come second half of the game. On the Raiders, we have Doug Martin and Jalen Richard. Right now, while the Raiders look as bad as they do on offense, on defense, on special, whatever the Raiders do, they don't look good at it. I'm not going to risk it with any of these guys. I don't care about bye weeks. I don't care about anything. If the Raiders are in... For the Raiders, we have Doug Martin and Jalen Richard, both who have been disappointments. Jalen Richard was primed to have a great week last week and did not. He disappointed once again with only 2 carries for 4 yards, added in 4 receptions for 45 yards. Nothing to write home about for sure. Doug Martin had himself a whopping 7 fantasy points last week. This is just an offense that is horrible. The defense is horrible. The offense is horrible. The roster is falling apart. The front office is falling apart. I don't want anything to do with starting any of these guys in the backfield for the Oakland Raiders this week, despite it not being a horrible matchup. I mean, the Chargers are allowing 24 fantasy points per game, but those are to teams with less issues than the Raiders. I'm not risking it. Both these guys are sits for me here in Week 10. Seahawks and Rams are next. For the Seahawks, we're going to need to watch the practice reports. Doesn't sound like Chris Carson is going to really practice much this week. There's a chance that he sits. And if he does, Mike Davis and Rashad Penny will carry the load going up against the Los Angeles Rams defense, which is currently ranked 14th against opposing running backs, giving up on average 23 points per game. They've allowed multiple touchdowns to opposing running backs the last 2 straight weeks. This is definitely a matchup which you don't avoid. The problem is, I don't know how much we really know. This can be one of those things where they lead it up on Sunday as Carson being a game-time decision. And that makes it hard because you really don't know what to do and who to start in this backfield. I had Mike Davis as one of my pickups in my waiver wire show this week. So if you have him and you have no better option and Carson doesn't practice this week, he's not a bad start because he is so involved in the passing game. The problem is we really don't know. As of right now, I have all of them as sits in Seattle. We need to see a little bit more from these practice reports, from the injury reports, to see who's going to be the lead guy. If it comes out that Chris Carson is not active for this game and that he's going to sit, then I will make Mike Davis a start. But like I said, it's something we got to pay attention to here later on in the week. All right, for the Rams, we have Todd Gurley. I'm going to sit Todd Gurley. Nah, no, I'm not. He's a start. Were you paying attention? You weren't falling asleep, right? Miami and Green Bay are next, and this one was easy to see coming, right? Kenyon Drake went out there, had double digits 3 out of the last 4 weeks, had a matchup against the Jets. What do? They give Frank Gore 20 carries, and Kenyon Drake gets 3. Yeah, we really didn't see that much coming, but I have a feeling it's going to be like this rest of the season. It's what we thought in the preseason, right? We knew when they brought in Gore that he was going to be involved, that all 20-some touches a game weren't going to Kenyon Drake. Gore is going to be involved, and for that case, it really limits the upside of Kenyon Drake. One positive here, if the Packers can go out there and put up points on the Dolphins, they could have to rely a little bit more on the passing game, which bodes well for Kenyon Drake. It's more of a game flow issue than anything else. Drake has the talent. That's never been the problem. It's been the amount of touches that he sees week to week. I expect a bounce-back week from Kenyon Drake this week, but I'm limiting expectations just because Frank Gore is going to be involved every single week going forward. As long as he's healthy, he's involved. So Drake has a limited upside. If you have a better option, I'm not against sitting Kenyon Drake. I don't see a huge game out of him this week. But if you have no better options, hopefully you can throw him into your flex, have limited risk, and have to go no further than that. As far as Frank Gore, also too inconsistent. Unless you're in one of these huge 14-team leagues or larger, I'm not starting Frank Gore either. On the Packers side of the football, we have Aaron Jones, who's going to be one of my starts of the week here in Week 10. He's definitely somebody that we need to pay attention to going forward. But I get it. He hasn't rushed for 100 yards in a game yet this season. His best so far, 86 yards and a touchdown, was back in Week 8. but they need to get the run game going in Green Bay if they expect to allow Aaron Rodgers more time to let things develop in the passing game. Sounds like Geronimo Allison is out, so MVS gets a huge bump in this offense. But if they can get Aaron Jones going, he has that home run ability, and if they can get him close to that 15 to 18 touches per game, which it's trending towards, he could be somebody who's very valuable here this week. It's going up against the 26th ranked run defense of the Miami Dolphins. They've allowed over 100 yards to opposing running backs every single week with the exception of 3 weeks so far this year. Definitely a team you can run on. Almost 30 points a game to opposing running backs. I very much like Aaron Jones this week, and he's going to be one of my starts of the week. Cowboys and Eagles are next, and for the Cowboys, we have Zeke, and if you have him, you're starting him. I understand that you're a little bummed out with what you've gotten from Zeke so far. He still is the number 9 ranked running back in fantasy football, averaging almost 18 points a game. But yes, he hasn't had that huge game. The touchdowns haven't really been there. But if you have him, you're starting him. It is somewhat of a tougher matchup this week against the Philadelphia Eagles. They've only allowed over 100 yards one time to a rusher, and that was back in week 6 in Saquon Barkley. They've only allowed 2 rushing touchdowns by opposing running backs here on the season so far. It's a difficult matchup, but if you have him, you're starting him, and you're crossing your fingers because Zeke can break out at any time. On the Eagles side of the football, we still have the committee of Corey Clement and Wendell. Don't tell me I have Smallwood. And this is going to be a rough week. Now, Dallas is somewhat of a decent defense against opposing running backs, giving up on average 23 points per game. They've only allowed 4 rushing touchdowns on the year, which is pretty good. But what do we do with this backfield in Philadelphia? Who's going to see the touches? Who's going to be the most involved? Corey Clement really hasn't done anything so far this year. In fact, their last game before the bye week, he only had 4 carries. Wendell Smallwood is somebody who's been a lot more involved in the passing game. He also had 8 carries their game before the bye week, along to go with 2 receptions, 42 yards, and a touchdown. But we need to start paying attention to Josh Adams also. He actually had 9 carries for 61 yards in that game before the bye week. And if he starts, entering himself into this mix, it's going to make almost all 3 of them non-fantasy relevant. As of right now, the only one that I would start would be a flex play and Wendell Smallwood for his ability in the passing game. Kind of what we saw with Dion Lewis against these same Cowboys last week. That could be the potential upside of a Wendell Smallwood. But if Josh Adams really asserts himself into this backfield going forward, it's going to be really hard to start any of these guys. Like I said, though, for Week 10, the only one I'm willing to risk it on is Wendell Smallwood as a flex at best. Monday Night Football, we have the Giants at the 49ers. If you have Saquon Barkley on the Giants, he's a definite must-start, one of the best running backs in all of football, fantasy football-wise. Definitely going to be a must-start this week going up against the San Francisco 49ers. Not going to waste your time on starting Saquon. For the San Francisco 49ers, we have Matt Breida and I guess Alfred Morris. Now that Raheem, I'm not quite a must-start. Mostert broke his arm. Yeah, it was gross. It went the wrong way. Anyway, he's no longer in the mix. And Matt Breida is still going to be the clear number 1 running back in this offense. The problem is, how healthy is Matt Breida? This is one of those things we need to pay attention to. If Matt Breida is practicing in full by end of week, if he's going to play, he's a decent start this week. Going up against the 23rd ranked run defense of the New York Giants, who've given up touchdowns 3 straight weeks. They give up on average almost 28 points a game. It's a good start if Matt Breida is playing. If Matt Breida is limited at all or out, and it's the Alfred Morris show, I don't quite have that same excitement to start Alfred Morris. If Breida is healthy, he's a start. If he sits, I'm not going to start Alfred Morris either. He's just been highly inconsistent. In the touches that he has gotten, he hasn't done a whole lot with it, averaging close to 2.5 yards per carry. I don't want that in my lineup. I'd rather take somebody with some higher upside than Alfred Morris. But for right now, I'm just hoping that Breida's healthy, can come in, start the game on Monday night, and be good to go. If he is, he's a solid start. All right, those are my starts and sits for the running back position here for Week 10. Hopefully that helps you make your decisions a little bit easier on your lineups. Be on the lookout. Live show coming end of week. As of right now, I'm trying to aim for 3 p.m. Saturday afternoon. Hopefully I can get that nailed down. Make sure you're paying attention to YouTube, though. I like to put posts in there every once in a while and let you guys know when I plan on going live, trying to give you a little bit of a heads up. I really appreciate the support. Make sure you guys are liking and subscribing, and I look forward to talking to you here end of the week. Have a good one. Thanks. Bye.